Chris, thank you for joining us today. It's a big pleasure having you here. You're welcome. And for everyone that is following our session here, Chris is one of our friends, is a big partner we have. Chris, really thank you for joining us today. You're welcome. Feel as you are in your home. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and boa tarde para todos. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you, and I'm sorry that we couldn't be in the same room and enjoy the same coffee and the same cerveja and caipirinhas. And you know, my children. I told my children I was doing this today, and they just like, Daddy, we miss Brazil. We miss Brazil. I think everyone misses Brazil right here, Alex. Tiago. So thank you for this invitation. I want to talk a little bit about strategies for the new normal, and I think this is a very important topic, and I think it's a very fascinating topic that we all should be exploring. And I want to take a sort of a quick step back first. So I've had the pleasure of working on Norway, Brazil, and Brazil, Norway for about mais ou menos 10 anos. And it's been a really, really enjoyable journey with my Brazilian friends and with my Brazilian contacts, and really learning about the Brazilian business culture. And I've had a chance to work on Brazilian management and innovation for many, many years, but never in a situation like this. So this is what I would do normally right now. This is me and my family. It's with the Casa na Montañas, Noruega, and we would, you know, hang out and go skiing with the dog and go kite on the snow and all the things that Norwegians would do. But that's not happening, because now we spend all our time, 18 hours a day, working with executives, working with business schools, working with governments, working with companies on transformation. And I'm going to try to share some of my stories. I'm going to try to share some of my tools. And I hope that you find this interesting, because in the last 6 weeks, we have basically been working flat out. Here you have James in South Africa, and you have Enrico in Belgium, and we are working on how can we develop faster transformation in banks in South Africa and in telecommunication companies in Europe. And they're all coming together because of the Corona situation. And I'm going to share some of that with you today. So my starting point is really that this is the biggest crisis any of us ever will experience, and it's worse than having bad presidents, and it's worse than having wars with your neighboring country, and it's worse than just a financial crisis. So right now is the early stages of the worst crisis we'll ever experience. And you know, I've been a professor at business school for almost 20 years, and we don't know how to teach this. We don't know how to prepare for this. We don't know how to help companies get it ready for this. Just today, right now, the Bank of England warns UK set to enter worst recession for 300 years. Just think about that. It's the worst financial crisis for England for 300 years. And it's not just because of Brexit. We're going to see a lot of this. We're going to see a lot of different countries go into the same sort of, you know, massive long-term recession because of this. So we need new strategies, and we need new strategies for the new normal, because companies need to move forward anyway, and companies need to create new products and new services and new business models, and leaders like yourself have to come up with really, really difficult solutions to almost impossible challenges. But first we should ask, what is this new normal, and what do we mean, and what do we understand? I work with energy companies, I work with CEOs, I work with travel companies, terrible. I work with government agencies, I work with big telcos. None of them know what the new normal is, but all of them are trying to figure out, and they're trying to navigate, and they're trying to move as agile as they best can in this new normal. I think that's the key message: strategic agility in the new normal. So what I'm going to talk about are strategy shocks, disruptive scenarios, and transformation. And then we're going to end up with a few of the things that we are currently doing in Brazil, together with Thiago Grangi, who is our director for Brazil. And I hope that you will find this interesting. I'm going to be sharing with you 3 strategy canvases. And these are canvases that you can download and you can apply and you can use them right now. So we have scenarios map, we have scenarios strategy map, and then finally we have the transformation roadmap. And we're going to talk about all those 3. And if you think they're relevant, you can just go online, you can download them, and you can start using them right now. And this is all part of a big work that we've been doing, where we recently published the first report, Building the Transformational Company, a CEO handbook. And we now have a book coming out with the same project. And in this book, we've developed a large series of visual canvases that strategy leaders and CEOs and directors are using right now to navigate through this crisis. So let's start with this strategy shock. So what is a strategy shock? So strategy shock is a sudden, unexpected, wildly unlikely event or series of events that fundamentally challenges or evaporates the key strategic assumptions that we've had about our company's strategy. Now, if you are in the airline industry in Brazil, your assumption is that yes, we can have a little bit of COVID-19, but people will still be flying. People in a country the size of Brazil will still have to fly. Well, that's an assumption. You look at a company like Petrobras. The assumption would be that yes, it's a turbulent time up and down, but oil prices are still going to stabilize at a normal level, but that's not the case. There's such a big turbulence in the oil markets that it's very, very difficult to foresee. You look at companies like Airbnb, and of course there's a lot of Airbnb in Brazil. Boom, 25% of all their employees gone, probably 48 to 55% of all Airbnb customers gone. So there's a lot of these strategy shocks. And a strategy shock will take your old strategy and just completely destroy it, rip it to pieces, tear it to shreds. And then we have to come up with new strategies. We can't stay with last week or last month or last year's strategy. We have to come up with new strategies. And this is muito difícil, because leaders are going through these shock and cut phases where all they think about is the shock. How do we handle the shock? How do we fire people? How do we cut costs? How do we lay off? How can we save some money? And only the few actually make it through to this transform stage. But we've seen this before. We have seen this play out before. 2014, Norway, Brazil, Saudi, US. Oil crisis, boom. Oil prices goes from $115 a barrel to $29 a barrel. And many thought it would go even further down. It's a big shock. It's a strategy shock. It happens to everyone. Boom. What do? We build transformational capacity, or the ability to think and act in a transformational way that allows companies that used to be oil and gas companies to now actually become broad-based energy companies, industrial giants, to be clean energy powerhouses, to become aquaculture and seafood giants. And I think that you have many companies in Brazil right now that are going through a strategy shock, and they need to be able to build this transformational capacity. It's very difficult, very difficult, but it is possible. We have done this before, and we can do it again. But I think it's important to be able to have this transformational capacity. We have to start with, what do we believe in? What do we think about the short-term future? So we have this thing called the scenarios map. And I want to show you 3 different scenarios. These are just my examples. You need to create your own examples. You need to create your own stories. And you should really do this together with your management team, together with your employees, together with your board, together with your investors maybe. So here we have scenario number 1. And again, this is just my example. Scenario number 1 is the sharp V recovery. We think that within 90 days, everything comes back to normal. I don't think so. You can see here the impact on us on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being very high, it's a 6. But what is the likelihood of happening with 1 being very low and 10 being very high? So it's a 6, so it's a medium. Here we have something else. This is a second scenario. This is what we call the business winter. This means that the current situation stays highly uncertain until late September. Massive lack of consumer confidence. A lot of the stock exchanges, they close. Very large government bailout packages. And it's very, very, very difficult. So how would we be able to recognize this? We don't know. We need to pay more attention, because if this scenario is happening, it's a lot of trouble for us. Now, what are the first signals that we maybe see? Well, if the virus doesn't slow down, or if there's no vaccine in the short term, then this is very, very likely. This long-term business winter, very difficult for a long time. Impact on us, 10, the highest. Likelihood of happening, 8, very high. Now you have 2 scenarios. Now, if you don't know which one of these is more likely, or which one you're more likely to build your strategy on, it's difficult. Boom, one more. This is the second wave. Second wave. Muito mais grande, muito mais perigoso. This is where in October and November and December, a lot more people are getting sick, a lot more people are dying, and a lot more companies are going bankrupt. This is just so much worse. Closed borders, broken supply chains, very devastating, very difficult. And this could also happen. Now, in this example, it says likelihood of happening 4. Okay, so it's less, but still. Now, I can't tell you which of these scenarios is more correct, but I can tell you that you should be doing this exercise. So you take the scenarios map, you get your team together, and you say, okay, what do we believe in? What do we believe in? What is a good case? What is a medium case? And what is a worst case scenario? And let's map that out. And then we discuss how do we handle it. Now, I talk with CEOs almost every day. And even the biggest CEOs, they said, we had no scenario for this. Having COVID-19, having currency problems, having the oil and gas war, nobody could see that coming. Well, that's because they haven't been working through scenario maps with scenario 1, 2, and 3. And that's what you should do. So in these slides and also on the website, you can find the scenarios map, and you can find this scenario strategy map, which is a more advanced sort of intermediate level. And I think that these are really important things. I think companies all over the world, and all over Brazil, should be working with this. Right now, we are working with governments, so the governments can actually train companies across the whole country to do this. So that's the first part. The second is this thing about the transformation roadmap. And I have been working with strategy for almost 20 years. I've been advising companies and governments and teaching business school for many years. And the way that many companies are doing strategy is outdated. We need a different, more agile, more flexible, more fast-moving way of doing strategy. And this is what we call creating the transformation roadmaps. So I want to share with you, and I hope that you find that interesting, I want to share with you this idea of a transformation roadmap. And a transformation roadmap has 3 distinct phases. Phase number 1, we have to understand the landscape. Do we really, really understand what's happening around us? Phase number 2, we need to create this journey, building the capabilities, creating the journey that the company can go through on innovation, on business models, on corporate venturing. And then finally, we have to build out the operations. So we train the people, we invest in the right projects, and then we do it again and again and again. So this is the transformation roadmap, and we describe this in the report. And right now we have a lot of companies where the old strategy is really dead, and they need to create new strategies for the new normal. So they work with transformation, and they work with strategy shocks, and they work with scenarios. Right now, we have a few thousand companies that are working on this, and they can access the material, they can work through the tools, and they can learn how to work very differently with strategy. So these are things that I think that maybe you could think about. So if you want to build transformational companies, and if you want to apply these things, strategy shocks, scenarios, transformation roadmap, we have a lot of programs and e-learning modules, because we used to travel to help companies. Now everything goes online. And we have programs here in English, in Portuguese, in Spanish. We are working on Russian and Italian. And a lot of these programs, you can just go online, click in, and you can start it for free. So a lot of these programs are free. Some of the programs are paid. And you will find some programs here for startups. You're going to find some programs here for the corporate. You're going to find some programs here for consultants. So there's a lot of different programs. And we have really, really good leadership in Brazil with Thiago Grangi, who's doing all this with the Brazilian companies and the Brazilian Portuguese, of course. So finally, I want to leave you with, we need leadership, and we need a different type of leadership, because the old strategies and the old leadership doesn't work. So we need much more transformational leadership. And we don't see that. We don't have enough of that. We need leaders that are able to create opportunities in crisis and lead through this transformation. And you can read more about that in the report. And then finally, just before I close out here, I just want to share with you that we are actually in the process of building out a series of strategy labs in Brazil. And Brazil is actually the first country in the world where we have a chance to do this. So I'm very excited to see what the Brazilian landscape is going to look like. We have a lot of great partners, and we have a lot of great people led by Thiago Grangi. And I'm really excited. And I really hope I get a chance to fly back to Brazil very, very soon. Now we have a crisis. We have to come up with new strategies, and then we have to return back to this new normal. And it's going to take a lot of leadership. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of good strategic agility. And that's where I think I'll stop. And Thiago, Skal, I am happy to take some questions or try my Portuguese in any way.
Thank you, Chris. Amazing topic, this one you brought. I have a lot of questions here. Me and my team are selecting a few. You said we need to prepare things for a short-term future. How short exactly? And do we have a future?
That is a great question. So I think short term right now, 30-day, 90-day, and 180 days. I think that's what we need to do. Companies need to come up with plans and scenarios for the next 30 days, for the next 90 days, and for the next 180 days. And that's very, very different, because companies aren't used to doing that.
Yeah, it's very short, huh?
Very short, very short.
It is very short. Another one here, how to help the executives and decision makers keep in touch with the customer's needs and accelerate decisions the fastest they can. One of the things we are talking for a long time is about the customer experience. And a lot of companies still don't have this customer-centric structure. How to help them is keep in touch with the customer needs and how to respond to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for some companies and some industries, for example, in IT and technology, I almost expect the CEO to be on Twitter, like Elon Musk, and actually engaging with the customers directly on Twitter. Um, Now, a lot of CEOs don't want to do that, but at least to use the digital tools that we have, like Zoom and like many other tools, to actually be in that information flow with customers. So I know some CEOs are actually spending time with their customer centers and customer call centers to really make sure that they're part of that information flow. But if I could speak freely, every CEO should be on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Not every one of them has this um, courage to be in
No,
that line, right? And
exactly.
a lot of companies are struggling in this moment right now, asking if they need to make their products a better offer, or should they throw them all away and bring something new?
That of course that really depends on what you're doing. So for Zoom, for example, yeah, we have Zoom here. Zoom just do the same thing that they have been doing, just do it faster and better and build out more security. Other companies, they stopped making clothes and they start making face masks and protection equipment. Very smart. Um, some companies like for example, I was reading about sex toys today. I was doing research. Yeah? Sex toys in some countries like Germany, they are now selling 8 times as much sex toys as they used to. So that's a whole new success. But of course, companies need to ask, are the products and services that we have today, is that what's going to be selling for the next 30 days and 90 days and 180 days? And they really need to make sure that they understand and adapt accordingly.
Okay. I feel particularly, I myself, I'm speaking for myself. I'm seeing a lot of people thinking that we are just living in a kind of nightmare, not exactly things that are not really happening. So, how can we make companies aware that what we are facing is definitely real?
Yeah. Chaga, that's something we hear from many companies, especially companies with a closed company culture. So I think there are two things. The first one is actually to read different sources, read different newspapers. So, maybe make sure you read Financial Times, New York Times, um, the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong is really good coverage of the COVID-19, but also bring in outside voices. So if you're doing a crisis strategy process, don't do it with only your management team and only your board. Bring in some different people from different perspectives, from a startup, from the government, from a bank, from other countries, and let them come up with more information and different information into your strategy making process.
Great. I have another question here is, can the past strategies, the old school strategy, support big change we are going to face?
That is a very tough question, and the answer is no, they can't, because a lot of the traditional strategies, Michael Porter and those, they were built for a much more stable business environment with much less change. So when we started the project that is strategy tools and the platform, we want to make sure that the world has the right tools for a very different age. And that's what we're building now. And that is a very different way of working with strategy, with very different processes and methodologies.
Amazing answer. I have another one that is very interesting. Interesting here. I saw a lot of presentations with cases like Uber, Airbnb, others talking about the disruption. Now these businesses are facing a big challenge. We see what Uber and another tech companies are facing. Do you believe the crisis will somehow reverse the globalization?
Okay, so that's That's probably two questions in one question. So if I answer the last part first, do I think the crisis will reverse globalization? I am afraid so, yes. And I think the way that many countries, governments are sort of closing the borders and not helping, that is very unfortunate. I think with the bad political leadership we have in many places, including the US, it's going to be very, very bad for globalization. I think that this shouting match between China and the US is really, really destructive. But having said that, Uber and Airbnb, and I saw that question in the writing, I think when this is over, we're going to see that Airbnb was really badly hurt, but much less so than the hotel business. Because Airbnb has a really smart business model because they don't own the assets. So they're not responsible for the rooms and the houses, while the hotels are responsible for the rooms and the houses. So yesterday, Airbnb lay off 25% of the workforce. They're probably going to lay off another 25%, but it's still much better than many of the hotels. So when we look at the other disruptors, like for example, again, Zoom for video, they're going to do so much better than, for example, Cisco and Microsoft. So we like these disruptors and we want more of them.
Great. They are suffering, but less, right?
Yes.
We have Thiago Grande joining us here. Thiago, do you want to say something? Want to ask a few things?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. I just jumped in, so thank you anyway. I'd like just to add that this partnership between Strategy Tools and Liga Ágil makes so much meaning. For example, we're listening to people speaking about strategic agility, so we can see this convergence of our capabilities here, strategy and agility. And I am quite sure that for this new normal, for this upcoming new normal, we can work a lot together. And everybody who is listening to us and attending this wonderful live with wonderful guests are able to reach out to us and ask whatever they need. We are here to help you, and let's work together.
Great. It's always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. I have another question for Chris. This one came from YouTube, if I'm not wrong. The scenario of crisis was somehow known, and we just didn't know exactly when it would happen here in Brazil. So how can we work with organizations and help them to forecast this kind of situations in an uncertain future?
That's good question. So I'd like to give Thiago two answers to that question. So the first answer is really about the right here and now, because I think there's a lot of things that we can do right now. So maybe you are a consultant, maybe you are a strategy leader. I think it's important to go in right now and speak with companies and talk about these scenarios. Now, some of the clients that we work with, they have a really hard time inside their own companies to create an understanding at the highest level of these potential scenarios. So that's right now very difficult. For the future, I think we're going to be using this example of how sudden and how unexpected and how devastating the COVID-19 crisis was. But we could have planned for it. We could have seen it coming. So if we do scenario planning better, we are going to be better at avoiding this for the future.
Great. And how can we make that happen with government? I know you're particularly working with governments, so how can we help them? They are so straight sometimes.
Well, I think right now we have the best argument and we have the best ammunition that we could ever hope for. Look at what happened. So you have the Western countries like Brazil, like the US, like the UK, and you compare that with many of the Asian countries like Taiwan, like Singapore, like Thailand, and you see how much better they did in terms of the disease and the mortality. So I think governments, especially in the West, now they have a big responsibility to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because a new epidemic and a new pandemic could happen again and again and again and again. We must avoid it.
Great. Chris, our time is finishing. Thank you. Thiago Grande, thank you for setting this and making this happen. Chris, thank you for your time. It's always a good pleasure talking to you and listening to you. You are a very wise man. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation. Best of luck and boa noite.